Months after the dust settled, Emma's neighborhood transformed in ways she never imagined. The once oppressive HOA was now a beacon of transparency and cooperation, led by a group of residents committed to fairness. Richard's shadow no longer loomed over the community, replaced instead by leaders who listened and valued input from everyone. Flower beds bloomed brighter, streets felt safer, and neighbors greeted each other with genuine smiles rather than wary nods. For Emma, life began to return to normal, or at least as close to normal as it could be after such an ordeal. Her mornings were quieter now, free from the constant worry of what might happen next. She still enjoyed her coffee on the porch, but this time, she did so without scanning the street for lurking figures. Instead, she waved hello to passing joggers and exchanged pleasantries with parents walking their kids to school. It was a small yet profound shift, a reminder that peace wasn't just the absence of conflict, it was the presence of trust. Still, Emma couldn't help but reflect on everything she'd endured. The fear, the sleepless nights, the moments when she doubted herself, all of it had left its mark. But those challenges also taught her something invaluable. Resilience wasn't about avoiding hardship, it was about finding strength in the face of it. Every setback became a lesson, every victory a testament to perseverance. And through it all, she discovered a deeper connection to her community, a bond forged not just by shared struggle, but by shared triumph. Her work as a district attorney took on new meaning too. Before, Emma saw her job as putting criminals behind bars. Now she viewed it as protecting people from those who sought to exploit or harm them, whether they wore suits or carried tools. She approached cases with renewed determination, knowing firsthand how abuse of power could devastate lives. Her colleagues noticed the change, often commenting on her unwavering focus and compassion. "You've always been tough," one coworker said during lunch, "but now you seem unstoppable." Emma also found joy in mentoring others. She started hosting monthly sessions for homeowners dealing with difficult HOAs, offering advice based on her own experience. People traveled from neighboring towns to attend, eager to learn how to stand up against injustice. Emma didn't have all the answers, but she encouraged them to document everything, seek allies, and never underestimate the power of speaking out. Change starts with one person saying, "Enough," she told them. And when others join in, that's when real progress happens. On weekends, Emma joined local volunteer groups planting trees and organizing charity drives. These activities brought her closer to her neighbors, many of whom had become friends. They laughed together, worked together, and celebrated milestones like birthdays and anniversaries. For Emma, these moments reminded her why she fought so hard, to create a place where kindness mattered more than control, and where people looked out for one another. One crisp autumn evening, Emma hosted a potluck dinner in her backyard. Streetlights twinkled above as plates of food were passed around, filling the air with the scent of homemade dishes. Neighbors lingered long after dessert, sharing stories and laughter under the stars. At one point, someone raised a glass to toast Emma. "To our fearless leader," they said with a grin. "Without you, none of this would be possible." Emma blushed, shaking her head. "This isn't my doing," she replied. "It's ours. We built this together." The room erupted in applause, but Emma's eyes welled up, not because of the praise, but because she finally felt home. As the night wound down and guests began heading home, Emma stayed outside a little longer, gazing at the quiet street bathed in moonlight. She thought about the journey that brought her here, the battles fought, the fears overcome, and the friendships formed. Life had tested her in ways she never expected, but it had also shown her what she was capable of. Sitting there, surrounded by the warmth of her revitalized neighborhood, Emma made a silent promise to herself. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she would continue fighting for justice, not just in courtrooms, but in everyday life. Because sometimes, the greatest victories weren't measured by laws changed or criminals locked away. They were measured by the hope restored in a single community. And for Emma Carter, That hope burned brighter than ever. Emma's discovery about Marcus Kane sent a chill down her spine. She couldn't stop thinking about the man she'd helped put behind bars years ago, a man known for his violent temper and willingness to do anything for money. The thought of him being free again, working under Richard Langley, made her stomach twist with unease. But what terrified her most was the possibility that Richard had deliberately brought Marcus into her life to make her pay for past mistakes. Late that night, Emma sat at her kitchen table surrounded by old case files, photos, and notes. Her mind raced as she pieced together the connection between Richard and Marcus. According to court records, Marcus had served 5 years in prison before being released early due to overcrowding. Now, he worked as a handyman for the HOA, handling repairs and maintenance around the neighborhood. It seemed too convenient, almost like Richard had handpicked him for this role. As Emma scrolled through recent work orders submitted by the HOA, she noticed something alarming. Marcus had been assigned to jobs near her house multiple times over the past few weeks. At first glance, it looked routine, but when combined with the vandalism and threats, it painted a sinister picture. Was he using his position as cover to harass her? And if so, how far was Richard willing to go? The next morning, Emma decided to test her theory. She called the HOA office pretending to need urgent repairs on her fence. When they sent Marcus to her house later that day, she watched him closely from her window. He moved slowly, glancing around as if checking for prying eyes. Instead of fixing the fence right away, he lingered near her backyard, jotting things down on his clipboard. Something about his behavior felt calculated, like he was gathering information rather than doing his job. That evening, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, Emma reviewed the security footage she'd installed after the break-ins. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. In grainy black and white images, Marcus could be seen walking along the edge of her property late at night, peering into her windows. He didn't look like someone simply passing through. He looked like someone casing the place. Emma knew she couldn't ignore this any longer. She reached out to an old colleague, Detective Laura Hayes, who specialized in criminal investigations. Over coffee, Emma explained everything. The anonymous notes, the vandalism, Marcus's suspicious activities, and Richard's possible involvement. Laura listened intently, nodding as Emma laid out her evidence. "This is serious," Laura said finally. "If Marcus is involved, you're dealing with someone who doesn't play by the rules. And if Richard's pulling the strings, this isn't just personal, it's dangerous." Laura advised Emma to document every interaction and gather as much proof as possible without putting herself in harm's way. "You're smart, Emma," she added, "but don't underestimate them. People like Richard and Marcus thrive on fear. You need to stay one step ahead." Determined not to let them win, Emma devised a plan. She started keeping detailed records of every incident, noting dates, times, and descriptions. She also began carrying pepper spray and ensured her phone was always charged in case she needed to call for help. Most importantly, she resolved to use her skills as a prosecutor to expose their scheme. One thing became crystal clear. Richard wasn't just trying to intimidate her into leaving. He wanted revenge. Whether it was because of the case she'd won against Marcus or some deeper grudge, Emma realized she represented everything Richard despised: justice, accountability, and strength. By targeting her, he hoped to prove he was untouchable. But Emma refused to back down. If Richard thought she would crumble under pressure, he had underestimated her completely. This wasn't just about protecting her home anymore. It was about standing up to bullies who believed they were above the law. As she stared at the photo of Marcus on her laptop, Emma whispered to herself, "Game on." The more Emma tried to ignore the strange happenings around her, the harder it became to pretend everything was fine. Her once peaceful home now felt like a battleground, and Richard Langley seemed to be pulling all the strings. Determined to put an end to the madness, Emma decided to confront him directly at the next HOA meeting. When the day of the meeting arrived, Emma walked into the community center with her head held high. She had prepared a list of questions and evidence to prove she wasn't violating any rules. But as soon as she entered the room, she realized something was off. The other homeowners avoided eye contact, whispering among themselves whenever she passed by. Richard sat at the front table, shuffling papers with a smug smile that made her stomach churn. Emma waited patiently for her turn to speak. When it finally came, she stood up and addressed the group calmly but firmly. "I've been receiving warnings about supposed violations," she began, holding up the orange sticker from her mailbox. "But I've reviewed the guidelines thoroughly, and I'm following every rule. This feels unfair and unnecessary." Richard leaned back in his chair, feigning surprise. "Ms. Carter," he said smoothly, "we're simply trying to maintain the integrity of our neighborhood. If you'd like, we can arrange for another inspection to clear things up." His tone was polite, but there was a sharp edge beneath his words, a subtle reminder that he held all the power. Emma pressed on, showing photos of her repainted mailbox and neatly trimmed hedges. "Then why am I still getting these violation notices? And what about the vandalism? My sprinklers were tampered with, my car was scratched, and someone keeps leaving threatening notes in my mailbox. Do you think this is acceptable behavior?" The room fell silent. No one dared to meet her gaze. Richard cleared his throat, leaning forward slightly. "Vandalism. That's unfortunate, Ms. Carter, but it sounds like isolated incidents. Perhaps you should consider installing better security cameras." His dismissive response infuriated her. But before she could argue further, he added, "Let's not waste everyone's time with baseless accusations. We have other matters to discuss." As the meeting continued, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Richard was hiding something. Later that night, unable to sleep, she pulled out old case files from her days as a prosecutor. Something about Richard's name nagged at her memory. Flipping through dusty folders, she stumbled upon a case involving Marcus Kane, a man she had helped convict years ago for extortion and assault. According to the file, Marcus claimed Richard had hired him to intimidate business rivals back then. Could Richard be using similar tactics now? Her heart raced as pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. Was Richard behind the harassment? Did he recognize her name and decide to retaliate? Or worse, had he brought Marcus back into the picture? Over the next few days, Emma kept a close watch on her surroundings. One evening, while watering her garden, she spotted a figure lurking near her fence. It was too dark to see clearly, but the silhouette looked familiar. Grabbing her phone, she snapped a quick photo before ducking inside. When she zoomed in later, her blood ran cold. The man bore a striking resemblance to Marcus Kane. Fear gripped her chest, but so did determination. If Richard thought he could scare her away, he was wrong. Emma knew how dangerous Marcus was. He had a violent past and no qualms about breaking the law. Yet, instead of backing down, Emma resolved to fight back. After all, she was the district attorney who locked him up once. She wouldn't let him, or anyone else, intimidate her into silence. But as Emma prepared to take action, she couldn't shake the sinking realization that this battle would be far more personal than anything she'd faced before. Richard wasn't just targeting her property. He was aiming straight for her peace of mind. And if she wanted to reclaim her life, she'd need to dig deeper and risk everything to expose the truth. Emma Carter had always dreamed of living in a peaceful suburban neighborhood. After years of hard work as a district attorney, she finally saved enough to buy her dream home. A cozy house with a small garden and plenty of natural light. The day she moved in felt like the beginning of a new chapter in her life. But little did Emma know, this quiet suburb held secrets that would soon turn her world upside down. The first few days were perfect. She spent her mornings sipping coffee on the porch, watching kids ride their bikes and neighbors wave hello. Everything seemed picturesque, almost too good to be true. That illusion shattered when Emma attended her first homeowners association, HOA, meeting. The HOA president, Richard Langley, greeted everyone with a smile, but there was something unsettling about him. His polished suit and confident demeanor gave off an air of authority, but his eyes revealed a thirst for control. As he spoke, detailing rules about lawn maintenance, parking restrictions, and even mailbox colors. Emma couldn't help but feel suffocated. It wasn't just the number of rules, it was how Richard enforced them. He didn't just remind people, he demanded compliance, often with thinly veiled threats of fines or legal action. At first, Emma tried to brush it off. She figured it was normal for HOAs to have strict guidelines, especially in such a well-kept neighborhood. So she followed the rules diligently, trimming her hedges exactly to the required height and making sure her car was never parked outside overnight. But no matter what she did, nothing seemed to satisfy Richard. One afternoon, while watering her plants, Emma noticed a bright orange sticker slapped across her mailbox. It read, *violation. Mailbox color non-compliant. Confused, she double-checked the HOA handbook. Her mailbox matched the approved shade listed in the guidelines. When she called the HOA office to clarify, they brushed her off, saying Richard made the final decision. Frustrated but unwilling to cause trouble, Emma repainted her mailbox anyway. But the problems didn't stop there. A week later, her sprinkler system mysteriously stopped working. Then, someone scratched her car door overnight, leaving behind deep grooves. Each incident left Emma more bewildered than the last. At first, she thought it might be random acts of mischief, but things took a darker turn when anonymous letters began appearing in her mailbox. They accused her of breaking HOA rules she hadn't violated and warned her to fall in line or face consequences. Emma started feeling uneasy in her own home. What once felt like paradise now felt like a trap. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her every move. And then it hit her. This wasn't just about following rules anymore. There was something personal about the way Richard treated her during meetings, the way his gaze lingered on her when she asked questions. Something wasn't right. Despite the growing tension, Emma refused to let fear take over. She reminded herself that she was a fighter. That's why she became a district attorney in the first place. If anyone could figure out what was going on, it was her. Little did she know, uncovering the truth would lead her straight into danger and force her to confront a shadowy figure from her past. The tension in Emma's life reached a boiling point one evening when she returned home to find her front door wide open. Her heart sank as she stepped inside, her pulse racing. The house was a mess. Drawers pulled out, cushions slashed, and papers scattered everywhere. It wasn't a random break-in. Nothing valuable had been stolen. Instead, it felt like someone had deliberately torn through her belongings, searching for something, or trying to send a message. On the dining table lay a single sheet of paper with bold, typed letters. *, you shouldn't have crossed us. *, Emma's hands trembled as she read the note. She knew exactly who us referred to. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was a direct threat. Whoever was behind this wanted her to know they were watching, waiting, and ready to escalate if she didn't back down. Panicked but determined, Emma called the police. When officers arrived, they took photos of the scene and collected the note as evidence, but their response left her frustrated. "We'll look into it," one officer said half-heartedly. But without witnesses or clear evidence pointing to someone specific, there's not much we can do. Emma pressed them about Richard and Marcus, but they seemed hesitant to investigate further. She couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's influence extended beyond the HOA. He likely had connections in places where he could pull strings. Realizing she couldn't rely solely on the authorities, Emma decided to take matters into her own hands. First, she upgraded her security system, installing motion-activated lights and cameras around her property. Then, she hired a private security guard to patrol her street at night. Though costly, it gave her some peace of mind, knowing someone was keeping watch while she slept. Still, Emma knew these measures wouldn't be enough to stop Richard and Marcus. She needed a way to catch them in the act, to gather undeniable proof that would expose their scheme once and for all. That's when inspiration struck. If Marcus was willing to break into her house again, she could use that against him. Emma staged an argument with her assistant outside her home one afternoon, loud enough for neighbors to hear. "I don't care what you say," she shouted, pretending to be angry. "If anyone asks, Tell them I've been reviewing trial documents here every night. They'll regret messing with me." The performance was dramatic, but effective. Anyone listening would think she kept sensitive legal files at home, files worth stealing. Sure enough, 2 nights later, Emma's plan worked. Her security cameras captured Marcus sneaking onto her property, flashlight in hand. He crept toward the side window, trying to pry it open. Inside, Emma sat hidden in the shadows, heart pounding as she watched him fumble with the lock. Just as he managed to slip inside, the room flooded with light. "Freeze!" a voice boomed. 2 uniformed guards rushed in, cornering Marcus before he could react. Startled and unarmed, he stumbled backward, his face pale with fear. Emma emerged from her hiding spot, her expression calm but resolute. "Hello, Marcus," she said coolly. "Long time no see." Marcus stammered, claiming he'd only come to check on a reported noise complaint. But the guards found tools in his bag, lock-picking equipment and gloves, and confiscated his phone, which contained incriminating text messages from Richard instructing him to make her life miserable. It was all the evidence Emma needed. As the guards led Marcus away in handcuffs, Emma felt a mix of relief and triumph. She had taken a huge risk, but it paid off. Now she had concrete proof linking Richard to the campaign of terror against her. The pieces were falling into place, and Emma was ready to strike back harder than ever. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small smile. Richard had underestimated her, but now the tables were turning. As the legal battles against Richard and the HOA unfolded, Emma became a symbol of resilience for her community. The once quiet neighborhood buzzed with conversations about accountability, justice, and reform. People who had lived in fear of Richard's iron grip now felt empowered to speak out. Neighbors began organizing meetings to discuss how they could rebuild trust and ensure nothing like this happened again. Richard's downfall was swift, but not without resistance. He hired an expensive defense team that tried every tactic to discredit Emma, accusing her of exaggerating claims and seeking revenge for personal grievances. But Emma remained unshaken. She presented her case with precision, using evidence to counter every false accusation. Her years as a prosecutor paid off. She knew how to stay composed under pressure and dismantle weak arguments piece by piece. The turning point came during one of the court hearings when Emma revealed audio recordings she'd secretly captured during HOA meetings. In them, Richard could be heard boasting about his ability to manipulate residents and evade consequences. "They'll never question me," he said on tape. "If they do, I'll bury them." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the judge listened intently. That moment sealed Richard's fate. Facing mounting evidence, his lawyers advised him to plead guilty to lesser charges to avoid a harsher sentence. It was a small victory, but Emma wasn't celebrating yet, not until the system itself changed. With Richard out of the picture, attention turned to the HOA board. Several members resigned in disgrace, while others agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for leniency. Emma pushed for sweeping reforms, including stricter oversight of HOA finances, term limits for leadership positions, and mandatory training on ethics and transparency. Local officials took notice, proposing legislation to regulate HOAs statewide, a move inspired directly by Emma's fight. But Emma didn't stop there. She organized workshops for residents, teaching them how to recognize signs of corruption and advocate for themselves. "Knowledge is power," she told the crowd at one event. "Don't let anyone make you feel powerless. Stand together, ask questions, and demand answers." Her words resonated deeply, sparking a grassroots movement among suburban communities across the region. Despite the progress, rebuilding trust within the neighborhood wasn't easy. Some neighbors still harbored resentment over past conflicts, while others struggled to adjust to a more collaborative approach. Emma worked tirelessly to mend fences, hosting block parties and community cleanup events to bring people together. Slowly but surely, the atmosphere shifted from tension to camaraderie. One evening, as Emma sat on her porch watching children play in the street, she realized how much had changed. The same cul-de-sac that once felt suffocating now radiated warmth and hope. New leaders had stepped up to guide the HOA, committed to fairness and inclusivity. Residents were no longer afraid to voice their concerns or suggest improvements. For the first time in months, Emma felt truly at peace. Still, she couldn't forget the toll this ordeal had taken on her. Sleepless nights, constant anxiety, and the weight of responsibility had left scars. Yet through it all, she discovered something remarkable about herself. Her strength wasn't just in her ability to prosecute criminals. It was in her courage to stand up for what was right, even when it meant risking everything. Emma's story spread beyond the neighborhood, inspiring others facing similar struggles. She received letters from homeowners across the country thanking her for shining a light on HOA abuses and giving them the courage to fight back. A local news station even nominated her for a Community Hero Award, though Emma humbly declined. "This isn't about me," she insisted. "It's about standing up for each other." Though her journey had been grueling, Emma emerged stronger and wiser. She proved that no matter how daunting the challenge, change was possible if you refused to give up. As she looked around her revitalized neighborhood, she felt proud, not just of what she'd accomplished, but of the unity she'd helped inspire. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. With Marcus in custody, Emma wasted no time putting her next plan into motion. She knew that catching him red-handed was just the beginning. Now she had to use the evidence to dismantle Richard's entire operation. The text messages between Marcus and Richard were damning, but Emma needed more. She wanted to expose not only their harassment campaign against her, but also the corrupt practices that had allowed Richard to manipulate the HOA for years. Emma spent hours combing through financial records and emails, piecing together a timeline of Richard's misdeeds. What she uncovered shocked even her. It turned out Richard had been siphoning funds from the HOA's budget for personal use, luxury vacations, expensive dinners, and even renovations on his own house. Worse still, he had used his position to intimidate residents who questioned him, often threatening legal action or withholding services until they complied with his demands. Armed with this new information, Emma reached out to Detective Laura Hayes again. Together, they compiled a comprehensive dossier detailing Richard's crimes. They included screenshots of the incriminating texts, bank statements showing suspicious transactions, and testimonies from neighbors too afraid to speak up before. Some residents hesitated at first, fearing retaliation, but once they saw the growing pile of evidence, they agreed to cooperate. Emma decided to take her findings public. She scheduled a press conference outside the local courthouse, inviting reporters from every major news outlet in the area. Word spread quickly about the embattled district attorney taking on her own HOA president, drawing crowds eager to hear her story. On the day of the conference, Emma stood confidently behind a podium, flanked by Laura and several brave neighbors willing to share their experiences. "Today," Emma began, her voice steady and strong, "I'm here to shine a light on corruption hiding in plain sight. Richard Langley has abused his power as HOA president to control, intimidate, and exploit innocent homeowners. He hired a convicted felon to harass me because I dared to challenge him. But I won't stand by and let this happen, not to me, and not to anyone else." She held up printed copies of the documents, walking the audience through each piece of evidence step by step. When she revealed the texts between Richard and Marcus, gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed as reporters scrambled to capture every detail. By the end of the presentation, social media was ablaze with hashtags like #ExposeTheHOA and #JusticeForEmmaCarter. The backlash against Richard was swift and severe. News outlets picked up the story, painting him as a villain who preyed on vulnerable homeowners. Calls poured into City Hall demanding an investigation into the HOA's finances. Even some of Richard's closest allies on the board distanced themselves, fearing association with his tarnished reputation. Within days, Richard resigned as HOA president, citing personal reasons. But Emma wasn't done yet. Using her influence as a district attorney, She filed multiple lawsuits against Richard and the HOA board members complicit in his schemes. Charges ranged from embezzlement and fraud to conspiracy and harassment. The court cases dragged on for months, but Emma remained relentless, determined to see justice served. Each victory felt like closure, not just for herself, but for everyone Richard had wronged. Meanwhile, Marcus faced additional charges for breaking into Emma's home. His lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but Emma refused to budge. "He terrorized me and my neighborhood," she told Laura during one meeting. "If we let him off easy, what message does that send?" In the end, Marcus accepted a plea agreement that kept him behind bars for several more years. As the dust settled, Emma reflected on how far she'd come since moving into her dream home. What started as a nightmare had turned into a fight for accountability, a battle she never imagined fighting but couldn't walk away from. Though exhausted, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Richard may have thought he could silence her, but instead, he ignited a fire within her that wouldn't burn out anytime soon. And while the road ahead promised challenges, Emma knew one thing for certain. She had proven that no matter how powerful someone seemed, they weren't untouchable. Not when the truth was on your side.